Getting ready was a very noisy affair. Fauve, normally a quiet, almost demure child, was loud and bouncing off the walls, metaphorically speaking, upstairs as she shouted at her tablet on the Chaos server about how she was going to see a ship land. To most species, this would be nothing special, especially these days, but at the time, no alien vessel had landed directly on Earth before. Not even the vessel that brought my professor actually landed. Like all vessels, they orbited, docked, and then boarded Earth transports to descend into the docking area. This was an exception, the very first of its kind, a direct landing on Earth, and that too was strange. I could chalk up the reason that both Earth and De La Misa were approving it, given recent events. Anything that shows we're completely at peace with one another must look good to both sides, I muttered while I toweled off downstairs and listened to Fauve's excited noises. She had to have been in the kitchen just waiting for me to be ready to go, and was busy talking to her friends on the server, while either she or one of her parents brushed her hair. Sex divisions in labor were once very stark in humans, but the lines blurred as their general sense of equality increased, and as a result in the modern era, William spent abundant time in caring for his children. Notably, he seemed to enjoy it, particularly in brushing her hair, considering it father and daughter time. The human urge to connect is a powerful one, crossing lines of sex and culture and, evidently, species. Or oddly enough, even reality itself, as humans grew bonded to both inanimate objects and fictional characters. More on that in the future. For the present at that moment, I was rushing a fair bit myself. I went through 4 towels even with both fans going at the same time, then threw on fresh clothes. I suppose I didn't actually need them, what with the fur and all. But I thought it was best if I met with the landing ship dressed in the local custom, so they'd recognize I was between both worlds at that moment. For clothing, I chose short cargo pants that were good and loose, coming down to just above the joint in my legs, and a button-down shirt with a chest pocket to hold a pen and paper pad. While most people on Earth didn't even need them anymore, I liked the aesthetic, and I appreciated the pragmatic approach of having a backup item to write with in case something went wrong with the electronic device I always had on me. After changing, I picked up my drenched clothing and tossed it into a basket holding other laundry to be done. Mrs. Walker did most of the washing. She was very particular about it after William said once, "As long as it gets dry, who cares how?" As I heard the story, she muttered something about weaponized incompetence, and forbade him from doing laundry after that, preferring to let him do something else instead. I had yet to be assigned any chores in the household, save for occasionally minding the tiniest human in the family, a task I enjoyed a great deal, even if it did occasionally get my tail pulled. I took my time going up the stairs despite the fact that I myself wanted to hurry. I was listening to Fauve's incessant chatter. "I know, people who actually live in space. It's amazing. Yeah, I'm getting the occasional nasty message still, but they've dropped off a lot. No, I'm not really worried. I've got Bailey and the others, plus Mom and Dad. I guess maybe those xenophobic nasties may throw a fit over an alien ship landing on Earth. But who cares? Teresa is still sore about what happened to her parents and won't let them get a lot of media attention except when they get arrested for stuff. I really wish Mr. Barnum were here to see this. He was a cool old man." Some humans would perhaps criticize me for eavesdropping on my human that way. It is considered rude by most human cultures, but not being human meant I didn't think that way. I'm a Dlamacin scientist first, a researcher in anthropology, and some things you can only learn by covert observation. The Walkers knew that when they took me in. I suppose, yes, I'm making excuses, but only for the greater good. Had Fauve's words been intimate or harmful to her, I would never release them. This, however, only offered insight into her excitable nature and the socialized way excitement was shared between individuals. I noticed how she still turned a thought to the late Percival Terence Barnum. He was an intriguing old man. There was no denying that. This is just one more example of the human capacity for bonds, even brief ones, to transcend death itself, even for the young. I reached the main floor of the house and made my arrival known by not hiding the sound of my footsteps. William wasn't present, however Bosun, Byron, and Rebecca were. Fauve's mother was finishing up putting her daughter's hair into a ponytail, and when she saw me emerge, she said, "I don't mind if she goes, but just to be clear, that's only if it isn't dangerous." "It isn't. It's safe even by Dlamacin standards," I promised, and with that, Rebecca made her decision. "Good. You're so risk-averse, I'm surprised you sleep on an elevated bed. If you say it's safe, it must be. Rebecca chuckled at her own joke, but neither Bosun or I did. Why is that funny? I asked, and Rebecca answered me with a casual quip. Oh, it's just that every year a few hundred people around the world die by falling out of their bed while they sleep, she replied, and both Botswan and I gasped. I'm picking up a rod to put in the frame so that doesn't happen to me, I said at once, and all three of the humans laughed, while Bosun nodded along with me. How are you all not extinct as a species? You're all so reckless. I was utterly baffled, but they shrugged all at once. Weaponized judicial recklessness has its uses, I guess. Byron replied to me and got up as soon as Fove's hair was done. The girl turned and traded an embrace with her mother. Okay, we're going, Mom. I'll do my schoolness tonight after I get home. Fove's homeschool program, being self-paced, let her work whatever hours she wished. I've said little about the human education system, but as we left the house, I asked what she knew about it in general. I will relay what she said as best I can. My dad says that a long time ago, schools were based off some kind of dumb ideas about learning, that education was one size fits all, that the goal was to make just good factory workers, and that's about it. Lots of memorization and repetition and tests. And it was only okay even at its best. That sounds kinda bad to me. But when things got modern, or started to, they got to kinda customizing education. Me, I got basic skills early, the stuff everybody needs. Simple math, language, writing, stuff like that. So that's like most education systems I've seen, including home, I pointed out, and Fove shrugged and said, I don't know about that, but when I started to get older, they started talent checks, where I tried a bunch of different things. That was around 10 after I had most of the basic skills a person needs just to live. Talent checks are where they started letting me look at more advanced subjects and trying simple versions of them, different types of science and other stuff from art and music to cooking and programming. The whole idea is to figure out what I'm good at. I'm still doing those now, and they'll keep going until I graduate. What happens then? I asked. Do you get assigned a job? I didn't think this was the case just based on my observations and Teresa's offer. But then, I couldn't be sure that my presence wasn't altering the options of my humans. No, I start applying to different things. They give me my aptitude ratings for everything, and I start secondary education if I want. Like if I want to be a doctor or a nurse and I have a high aptitude for it, I go for free to study it. But if I have a low aptitude for it, I have to spend 2 years volunteering for a hospital or something and earn a placement spot before I can go. Same goes for anything else. If I have a high aptitude for cooking, culinary school is covered. Low aptitude, I have to go through an apprenticeship to earn a spot. If I really want to do something I have a low aptitude for, I can buy access to the school if I've got the money, which I guess I do now. But I can only buy an empty seat, which means I may have to wait months or even years for one to open up. What if you don't want to do secondary education? I asked. Fove shrugged. Since Mr. Barnum left me lots of credits, I guess I don't have to work if I didn't want to, but I guess I could just keep working. Secondary isn't for everybody. But most people who don't go secondary instead go for a paid intern spot or go work at one of the other jobs that don't require more education to do, or ones that will train you specifically for it. Do you know what you want to do? I asked. I'd never asked Fove this question. I knew she was intelligent even by human standards. I tried to think of a job she couldn't do, and none came to mind. I don't know. I like what Teresa does, what Mr. Barnum did. I'd kind of like to keep that up. Teresa says I need some secondary school, but with her recommendation I'm guaranteed a spot anywhere in the world and can do a work-study split. But I'm also kind of interested in all the new xeno-studies stuff. Maybe. Fove had stopped talking to me. She trailed off, lost in her own world. I may have asked the question, but as we got on board the hover bus that would take us to a then completely unused landing platform outside of town, I could tell she was asking herself questions. I wonder if maybe I could combine xeno-studies and media management. Xenomedia specialist, maybe? She wasn't really answering me anymore. I could feel the shift in her focus. Young girl or not, there was ambition in this one, an ambition I could completely understand as being not that different from my own. There was a reason I liked this human so much, a reason I considered her mine. Reader, you may recall my mention of the spreading of media from Earth out into the wider galaxy, the popularization of human music, movies, television, and more? Perhaps it jumps ahead to tell you why, but the why was sitting right next to me at that moment as we raced on, wind in my face, savoring the scents and feel of the breeze, and happy as could be despite not knowing all that lay ahead. Knowing what I now know, with the benefit of hindsight, I shouldn't have been surprised by anything that happened, but that's how life is when you can't see the future. I envied the few races of the galaxy that had known precognitive abilities, at least a little. However, the thing about the precog races is, they didn't see literal futures, only probabilities, and with various degrees of reliability. While they enjoyed a marvelous reputation as advisors, the reality was that in checking the models made by normal human methods versus precog races, beyond a matter of days, human modeling outperformed the precogs. Largely because precogs could only come to a single conclusion individually or collectively, they were so predictive that they were myopic, and to put it bluntly, unimaginative. Humans, because of their lack of predictive power beyond simple pattern seeking, created elaborate models that imagined many outcomes. Most precog races were so limited that they had just enough warning of danger to know it was too late to avoid it. And I doubted even a precog could have seen coming the things that I experienced next. The hoverbus route carried us well out of the city limits. This was a functional necessity, as any ship coming in would need substantial space, and it would be extremely loud. This is one reason why Kentucky was one of the states where landings of this sort were possible. There were 12 points around Earth that had been built expressly for large ships to land, but none of them had ever been used. While I rode, I began browsing through the media outlets' coverage of the event. For the first time in history, an alien ship will be landing on Earth. The world's media outlets are watching, and we now go live to the scene where crowds have gathered to watch the historic event. The camera panned to show numerous onlookers, drones, and individuals who were gathered in the observation areas. There were a handful of protest signs, mostly misspelled. No alien invasion, no aliens, Earth first, go home extraterrestrials. But for every vile and hateful sign, there was something better a dozen times over. Welcome, neighbors. We're all aliens to someone, and friendship, discovery, for every bad human who lived in fear and hatred. There are 100 more who would sooner lend a hand, a hug, and help the people around them. I couldn't help but pity the hateful ones. Their world is so small, they can't see how big it all is, and what we could all do if we worked together. I was thinking out loud as I scrolled over the screen. What I said got Fove's attention, and she looked up from her own datapad and over toward mine. "Remember what I said before?" she asked, and as she'd said a lot before, I shook my head. "You're going to have to narrow that down." I told her, and she chuckled. "All right, that's fair. I mean, before everything, at the table before we met with Percival, how I wanted to speak for myself, how I didn't want to live in fear, how Fove Walker does not live in fear." "Remember now?" she asked. I did, and gave a quiet nod. "Yes, what about it?" I asked, and she put her finger on my datapad, scrolling it up to a man whose face was frothing with anger, mouth open, holding a sign with a caricature of an alien on a sign and a giant X through it. She tapped the screen and began to play the short video. "They want to replace humans, dangerous creatures, they's bad, it's all a lie, they ain't like us," he was shouting, bouncing around with nervous, manic energy, his pudgy face sweating bullets as he went on and on about a vast conspiracy that was utter nonsense. "That's why," she said with more solemnity in her voice than a young girl should ever have had. "I don't want to be like them, full of hate, full of fear, full of whatever makes people think like that. You see them all the time, even these days. Little worlds, little minds, they're cruel and think they're kind. They're evil and think they're good. They're full of fear and think they're brave because they lash out. I won't ever be like that. That's why I had to go talk for myself." She wasn't loud, but it got attention shifted to her from a few faces. Of course, Boatswain and I drew some attention, but less than we would have had the Earth government not broadcast what our species looked like all over the world. However, at first glance, Fove looked like any other human girl, so she drew no notice on the hoverbus until she said what she did. From there, the whispers spread, and she was recognized as the one who, depending on you asked, started, or was the start, of what was popularly referred to as the Battle of Waterland Park. She sat up straighter in her chair, ignoring the eyes and whispers. I wondered if we might have drawn more attention than I liked, but Byron crossed his arms in front of his chest, and between he and Bosun trading stares at anyone who looked her way too long, whatever passed for a peaceful ride was restored. In retrospect, I think people were just curious to get a look at her, a kind of morbid curiosity. I doubt anyone intended anything threatening. But Bosun and Byron are security officers first, and they took their work seriously. I couldn't help but wonder what it would look like to watch the two of them fight together. But I dismissed that as my natural predatory instincts rearing their head, and pushed it down. Thankfully, the hoverbus took us over a more skyward route, allowing us to bypass large swaths of terrain. There was no need to abide by the roads, and as such what would have been a 2 to 4 hour drive was a mere 30 minutes away, and the giant platform came into view. It was a marvel of human engineering, simple and pragmatic. The concrete surface was framed by enormous nets that would catch anyone who was blown away. A single high tower stretched toward the sky, and an array of smaller buildings including everything from a medical quarantine center up to and including a military security point all remained just outside the netting. The net itself was composed of nylon-wrapped metal that was highly magnetic. This magnetism was magnified tremendously by an underground facility, the purpose of which was to help draw the ship toward the center, where yet another magnetic field would draw the incoming ship in and then lock it into place. The amount of power required for this would be sufficient to keep a city going for 3 straight days, and it was all used in an hour. It goes without saying that starships were not expected to land often, but if they did, they would land exactly where they were supposed to. As the hoverbus landed in the parking area and everybody disembarked, we saw the crowds were already there mobbing the waiting areas and platforms, but at least there was a rope corridor and a security detail from my embassy, along with our ambassador and a matching group from the Earth government. "We're here," I said when we came within speaking distance of the pair of ambassadors. I had to marvel at the fact that I was here. Unsurprisingly, Sexlith was also present, as was the rest of my class, but for me this held special significance. Because unlike my colleagues, I had a personal stake in this. While they were bonding well with the other branches of the Walker family, they were also not on the short list of people who might have to leave. As such, Axlith ensured I would get to go with the official welcoming party, a chance to meet this crazed captain and make my request in person. The noise and furor was such that none of us could hear the other. Humans are a very noisy species. The crowd made my hair stand on end, and I briefly froze up. Even my ambition was not enough to make my legs start moving. The scale of the crowd was obvious. The numbers of humans was growing from hundreds, rapidly toward thousands. The noise of even quiet drones was growing like the wings of thousands upon thousands of mosquitoes. I saw so many faces turned our way as Fauve took my arm and practically yanked me forward. So much was on the line for me, between this and the crowd. The sea of smells and emotional states seeping out of human bodies from excitement to fear to hatred. It was getting to me. I wasn't the only one either. I looked down at Fauve, who held my arm tight in her slender fingers. She looked up and caught my eye. "Come on, I'm here too," she mouthed, though maybe she actually said it out loud. If she did, it was drowned out. On a large electrovid monitor, which to those not used to human tech is basically a video screen on fabric that you could stretch between 2 poles or pin to a wall, was set up where it could be seen by all. This particular model was 50 paces tall and 100 wide at least, and was set between 2 long metal flagpoles which had been pressed into service for the occasion. On the screen, I got my first look at the vessel that was closing in. A small square showed the human newscaster, one of the darker variations of humans, with a rich, smooth voice who said, "We've just been sent a first transmission from the captain of the vessel, along with a brief transmission. A freighter-class ship designation E-626, Earth designation ID Red Spark, here it is, on screen from its file photo." The echoing voice of the newscaster was quite neutral and might have been drowned out save for the impromptu speakers, and at the sight of the ship, the human onlookers, even the protesters fell quiet. It was definitely a Dlamacin cargo vessel. But from where we were standing by the time that announcement was made, and thanks to the new quiet from the pensive crowd, I could hear our ambassador speak quite clearly. "That is not the right vessel. They must be wrong." He said it so definitively that I found it hard to doubt him, but even so I had to ask, "If that's wrong, sir, then how is it here?" I raised my arm and pointed toward the sky. Clouds were moving aside, blown away by the ship's decelerators, parting the sea of white over our heads as it came into view.